Hello, lovelies. Today we're taking a look at the Book of Beasts for Forbidden Lands by Free League, and I can think of no more ringing endorsement of the game after my recent review than I went out and bought a supplement for it, which I do rarely. If I'm honest, as a game designer myself, I don't tend to feel as much need for supplementary material unless I'm doing something official or for an audience or, that sort of thing. So I have a lot more D&D books than my enthusiasm for D&D would otherwise reflect. But otherwise, when I do buy a supplement for a game, it's usually a good sign that the game is good and that I at least want to play it, whether or not I ever actually will. So I went out and bought the Book of Beasts for Forbidden Lands, which, following the D&D model, I guess, is kind of the third core book, and it does feel like it fills in a lot of what was missing in the box set. Other than the dice and the cards and that sort of thing, it does feel like this book should have been part of the set, really. You do have a small bestiary in the referee's book, but it's just not really enough. Sure, you can make humans and demi-human characters as enemies, but I don't know. A fantasy game without enough monsters is a problem, I think. And as a games master in this game, while the system's quite simple, the monsters that are monsters rather than people with people stats, they're a bit more involved than in a lot of games. It isn't really something you can just pull out of your ass at the last minute. Presentation wise, a lot of this is pretty much the same. It might just be the light in here today, but the paper looks a little whiter and a little less cream. The blacks look a little bit more dark and definitive than they did in the other two books, but otherwise the kind of sketchbook style is very much there. I want to think this is one of the artists that worked on that French miniatures game and Cadwallon. And that certainly looks like it anyway. But yeah, you get some monsters in here. That one column is the extent of the monsters, minus how to use the book. You got some in the main books, the referee book, but that's it. It's not a lot, is it? Really, when you think about it, and when you compare and contrast with, say, the D&D Monster Manual, which is packed with stuff. So it's a little bit spartan on the actual monsters, and I can't help but feel that a few things were kind of lost in translation. So amphibian isn't much of a name for a frog monster. There's plenty of other names out there that you could call them. Even Pepe or Groipers would be more effort and more evocative and more fun to kill than just amphibians. A couple of other things stood out to me negatively. The basilisk, which is on page 15. Okay, that looks more like a traditional basilisk. But then when you look at the description and so on, it's mostly describing a cockatrice. Now, maybe I'm over-invested in medieval bestiaries, and because I live not very far from Werble, which has a famous cockatrice story attached to it. Maybe I'm a little too attached to cockatrices as a monster. Cockatrice. whatever the plural of cockatrice is. Yeah. Anyway, maybe I'm a bit too attached to them, but that annoyed me slightly, more than slightly. That's really it, I think, as far as the ones that really annoyed me. I think the Tupalak is a real creature of mythology, but I couldn't place it, and I didn't bother to look it up before starting recording. So, yeah, someone will have to correct me on that one. But it's not just a bestiary, which is just as well, because if it was just a bestiary, it would be a little bit lacking. We do have proper random encounter tables, which is useful. We have a whole extra set of Games Master tools, which complements nicely the material in the referee's manual, whatever you want to call it. So you've got traps, books, ballads, and grimoires with some history and story behind them. Rules for journeys, additional rules for strongholds, which is a very expandable and important part of the game. Potions and poisons and more artifacts. Great. And one of the big things I said about the box set and the rules for this in general was that they were pretty good for solo play. And that was before there were explicit solo rules, which now exist in here. Again, I don't really understand the appeal of solo play as such, but it's useful even in normal play or in very small groups or one-on-one games, even if you're not just playing alone, to have these kind of tools available. So that's useful. Legends is more specific background to the world and so on, tied into monsters and locations. You'll find that useful if you want to use the default setting, less useful otherwise. In terms of good monsters, I liked their treatment of oozes, the amoeba, because you have a base form and then you have different interpretations and ideas, so it gives you a kind of taster of what else you can do with it. I thought the Bogman, despite its unfortunate connotations in British English, because bog is slang for toilet, I thought that was quite interesting, because reasonably often we find bog mummies because they're anaerobic environments, and the idea of bog mummies rising as undead is a fun one, so I liked that a lot. The Dread Raptor looks kind of cute and friendly to me. I think it's the beak. But yeah, that was not a disappointment, but kind of fun. You got some traditional fodder here, like giant spiders. Some of these entries are multiple entries. So with the giant spider, you have your hatchlings, your spiderlings. You have normal adult spiders. They divide it into male and female here, which if you know about spider biology, kind of makes sense. And then the really big bad ones are the elder female spiders. So you might get multiple entries for some of these. So there's more than perhaps I was implying there before. Different takes on dragons is always nice. D&D tends to dominate a bit. We have a European take on mummies, which kind of goes with the bogmen. These are embalmed or preserved ancient lords. They're much more like Draugr than they are traditional mummies, but I appreciate that. I like her. It's kind of nice that we are getting some more Eurocentric fidelity in some of the modern fantasy games, rather than the hodgepodge Monty Hall that D&D and DCC and others are, which is fine. It's great. It's wonderful. But for me, I mean, part of the big appeal of Dragon Warriors for me back in the day was it felt like British mythology. And a lot of these Scandinavian games feel like Scandinavian mythology, which you may be able to tell I'm quite into, because British mythology is syncretic anyway. There's not a lot else to really call out there in particular. Now, the reason this is going to be a game that's hard to improvise monsters for is because the stats aren't hugely important compared to the monster attack tables for each creature and the other things that define them, and you should be rounding out important monsters with legends and their place in the world and so on, so it makes sense. So it's hard to just pull a monster out of your ass and slap it into play. And that's probably something you shouldn't particularly do in this game either. So that's another aspect of all this to consider. So these are higher utility, but despite the lightness of the system, I think it's really a high prep game if you really want to execute what they want you to do with the game. But this certainly rounds out the options. I really think this should have been part of the base set, and that it wasn't, and that there weren't dice and cards in the base set as well, was disappointing. But this does make up for a lot of it. It's a little bit pricey considering what you get, but the quality of the book build is nice. No ribbon. Annoying. So style, 4 out of 5 for style. It's the presentation is as good or the same as that in the main Forbidden Lands core books. In terms of substance, tricky, because there isn't as much here as I would have liked, given the price point and everything. And it's got material outside beasts and beast-related things, which are welcome, but you wouldn't really necessarily expect them buying something called the Book of Beasts. So it doesn't have a tremendous amount of hugely useful content for you unless you're into your solo gaming. But what it does do is it really completes the holes that were lacking in the Forbidden Lands main set. So buy this and the core set, and I think you're set. So 4 out of 5 for style, 2 out of 5 for substance, but that doesn't really reflect. 3 out of 5. That's bang on average. So there you go. But in context, it's more like a 4 out of 5. Zang.
Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
Neverwhere is a book by Neil Gaiman and a TV series from 1996, which has also been produced as a radio play and as a graphic novel. I secured permission in 1997 from Crucial Films and Neil Gaiman's agent to produce a semi-official Neverwhere role-playing game, provided that it not be done for profit. With the Neverwhere RPG, you can follow in the footsteps of the Lady Door and Richard Mayhew Dick in exploring London's mysterious underside, the Twilight world just out of sight of normal people. Beware of Knight's Bridge, avoid the Seven Sisters, be cautious of Turnham Green, and walk the byways of the floating market. Neverwhere uses the description system, a bridge between descriptive prose and dice mechanics, to let you really bring your words to life. Available for free at drivethrurpg.com.